This is Bilbao, and this is Slow TV Radio from the meeting point, broadcasting not only to Bilbao but throughout the world. Hello again and welcome back to Round the Table. And this week's discussion is all about one of my favourite topics, and that is pubs.
Pubs. Yeah.
And
so you have loads to say about pubs.
I can say quite a few things about pubs that I think they are of great cultural significance, much more important than Buckingham Palace and soldiers with furry hats and all those other typical English things that people think about. But pubs, I think, are of great importance.
Yeah. So, well, where shall we start then?
Back in the beginning, as we said the other day, the idea of the public house, because that's what pub means. It means public house. So it's usually people that made beer and they were given special permission to sell it in their house, and their house was open to the public. So that was the original public houses. They used to have things called ale houses, which only served beer. I suppose they had cider houses as well, because the West Country had more cider than beer. Taverns were another thing they had, but you also had food in taverns, apparently. Ale houses were only drinking establishments. And then you had places like inns. You see a lot of inns, which were really for people travelling. So they were like hotel sort of things as well.
Oh, I see.
And some of those places were, there's some very old ones. The New Inn in Gloucester I stayed in once. That's really spectacular. That's really old. And that was for people travelling to visit their cathedral.
So can you stay in those inns?
Yeah, I stayed in the New Inn in Gloucester.
Oh,
yeah.
I see.
It's not new, it's really old.
It was new back
when
then.
it was named, it was the New Inn, yeah. Yeah, but it's really old.
What about that one we went to in London, near Barn Market?
Yeah, that's called the George. Yeah.
That was very old, wasn't it?
That was very old. I think that's from the 14th or 15th century, something like that. Yeah, that was another one, and that would have been a place where people stayed on the way out on that was the main road going out of South London, Borough High Street, I think it is. And yes, there used to be another one near there called the Tabard, which is the one that's mentioned in the Canterbury Tales.
Oh, yeah.
By Chaucer. And so they all start their journey. Well, for those people that don't know, the whole story, it was a book of several stories told by people who are travelling together. And they begin their journey from this coaching inn called the Tabard. And it's one of the first books, I think, that was actually printed in English.
Yeah.
So English literature begins in a pub, which is very important. This is why they're culturally important, you see.
Yeah.
Yeah, so they had these inns that were sort of, when people used to travel long distances, you couldn't go from one end of the country to the other in a day like you can now. You had to stop on the way, and often they changed horses and things like that, stayed for the night, ate lots of food, and then got back in the coach the next day. And
they're a bit different as well, because now I'm thinking about the one in the square in Barnstaple, the Lion.
Oh, the Lion Tap, yeah.
Yeah, and no, it's got where the horses used to come in. And
that's right. Yeah, that was actually the back place, because round the other side there was the main hotel where the rich people stayed, and the tap was round the back for the all the servants and the people that were driving the coaches and things like that. All the people that looked after horses. They had to drink out the back.
Yeah.
They always kept the poor people away from the rich people in those days, didn't they?
Yeah. What about their names then? Because you see lots of Red Lion, Black Horse, like related to animals.
Yeah. Well, one thing is that in the old days people couldn't read. or the majority of people couldn't read, so they just had a symbol outside. They just said, "Oh, I'm going to the Red Lion," and everyone. Red Lion is the most common name. Yeah, the Black Horse. In fact, if you go to Kingston, just outside London, I believe it's the only town that has a black horse, a white horse, and a grey horse.
Oh.
Yeah, that's a claim to fame. We were talking claim to fame, weren't we, the other day? What towns are famous for? That's their claim to fame. Yeah, the Grey Horse was a great pub for live music. Yeah. Yeah, so the symbols were quite easily recognised, and a lot of them were heraldic symbols. So they came from the coat of arms of aristocratic families or the king at the time, because I think the blue boar symbol, the boar is like a wild pig. I think the blue boar referred to one of the princes or something like that.
So you can tell how old the pub is according to the name, or do they change names?
Yeah.
Or?
No, because a lot of them they represent important things at the time. So if you go to London, because when London expanded a lot in the Victorian era, it grew a lot, and so they were building lots of houses, and it was getting bigger, and they built lots of pubs. So you got a lot of pubs. There's the Queen Victoria is a very common pub name in London, and the Prince Albert, who was the husband of Queen Victoria, because they were on the throne for a long time. So there are lots of pubs named after her, and also the politicians must have been very important, because you get all the Lord Palmerstons and Lord Stanleys and the Salisbury, that good pub down in the centre of London. So their politicians in those days must have been, you know, you wouldn't have it these days, would you? You wouldn't go down the Boris Johnson, would you?
No.
I wouldn't drink in there. But they must have had a lot of respect for their politicians. But I suppose it was a time when Britain was very prestigious and everything was very positive.
Yeah.
And they also commemorated events as well, because you get famous people, like you get the Lord Nelson and the Duke of Wellington because of the battles that were being fought. So you got the Trafalgar or the Waterloo and those kind of names. There's the Prince Blucher in Twickenham. He was the German that was fighting on the side of Wellington. So you got those that commemorate special events, and also the Reform Inn. That's supposed to be named after the Reform Act, when the rules changed in the 1830s or something, when more people got to vote. That's, I believe, I've heard that's what it's named after. And then you got lots of pubs that are named after professions and things. So you get the Bricklayers Arms or the Foresters or something like that, which I believe is because of the local industries or something. Those are the kind of professions that people had that used to go in.
So it's very different the way you go to a pub in England as we do here, isn't it?
Yeah. We normally have, most people have a local, we call it a local, and it's like, it just means your favourite pub.
It's favourite.
Yeah.
It's not, it doesn't necessarily mean the closest.
Not always, no. Usually it should be the closest, but sometimes if you do have a favourite pub, you sometimes have to walk a long way to get there, like I do. I because it used to be one of the closest pubs to where I lived, and then I moved to another place, and now if I'm back in my town, I walk past several pubs to get to the one I want to go to. But having a local is a good thing, because you don't have to phone anybody up and organise to meet anybody. You just go to the pub, and whoever's there are the people you socialise with on that night. And there'll be all sorts of characters, and some are closer friends than others, but you always know people, because you recognise faces, and you talk to people that you don't really know, but they look kind of familiar. Or sometimes you speak to strangers. You don't have to know everybody in a pub.
It's very different, because here we meet people in a bar and then we go to another one. We don't talk to people that we don't really know.
No, people tend to go out as a group, and that's the group for the evening. No, I find the pub is a lot more flexible than that. You can just go in and you can be with a group for the first hour, and then the group sort of disperses, and then you're in another little group, and people are moving around a lot. And some people go and different people arrive, and they swap over. That's if you're standing up. If you're standing up at the bar, the bit where you get served, like the counter where the beer is, that's called the bar. And that's why a bar that you go to is called a bar. That has an interesting history as well. But if you're standing up at the bar, you tend to get into conversations with other people that are going up to get a drink, and they sort of stand around talking. But the sort of unwritten rule is that if you're with a few people and you sit down at a table, then you tend to be with those people for the whole evening. And you don't have so much movement around then. And people sort of consider that, well, you're in a group and that's a sort of closed group then once you're sitting down at a table. Whereas if you're standing up, you sort of move from one group to another, and it's a bit more sociable.
Well, I guess if you are in the bar, it's because you went on your own, and then if you are going in a group, maybe you find a table. It's very different, really. It's very...
Well, I think it's a weather thing, really, because quite often in England you walk to the pub, and if it's raining, you're not going to go in and have a little drink and then go out in the rain again and walk to another pub for another little drink. You're just going to stay in one place and have several drinks in one bar.
Well, and I think it's different because here bars are very close to it, next to each other.
That's true,
So you don't have to really walk very far. But they are smaller, and there's not much room for... it's different.
But I think the fact that generally in Spain there's better weather, and people can go from one pub to another, or one bar to another, I should say, and you can go to lots of places. But it tends to be a group of people that stick together for the evening, doesn't it?
But then it's a better way to meet new people, I guess. If you,
Well, most people I know because I met them in a pub, really. Because if I go down the local, I know everybody or the majority of people there. But that's because that's the place I go to. And over the years, you just get to know everybody. And sometimes you can know someone for a long time before you discover what they do for a living. Usually we know first names, but you don't know surnames.
Funny that.
And quite often I've known people for a long time before I've discovered what their job is. And quite often you get people from quite a range of different jobs as well. If you go in early, if you go in sort of 5 o'clock, you get a lot of the builders and the plumbers and the electricians, because they've just finished work and they have a pint before they go home. And then you got, depends where the pub is, I suppose, because in London you get a lot of office people. And they're all very smartly dressed because they come straight from the office. Oh, and another thing we didn't mention is the fact that it's largely a male-oriented thing, isn't it?
I remember when I first went there, for the first years, there was no women at all.
No, you don't get many women who go in on their own. You sometimes get groups of women or women who are with men, but you don't get women on their own walking unless they feel very comfortable. If they've been in there a lot and they know everyone there, then they might feel a bit more comfortable about it. But it's not that common. And I'd say it's 90% male anyway.
Yeah, that's true.
Which is another different thing of the bars here. Here you get a huge cross-section of old people use the bars. And there's more coffee and there's more food and there are children and there's a whole... And they're open from first thing in the morning to last thing at night. So they've got a lot more variation in function. So sometimes I go past a bar here and there'll be a table with 6 old women drinking coffee and gossiping together. Like you wouldn't see that in a pub.
Yeah.
And sometimes people are in there with, the pushchair with the children and stuff. You don't see that in pubs.
Well, I see, because in England you have the pubs that are, I think, just for drinking.
Yeah.
But now you have more of these cafes where people go and have coffee there, like Costa and all the Starbucks and all this.
Yeah.
Which before, I don't think you had so many of those.
No.
Maybe small cafes, but I think people go to the pub just to have beer.
Yeah, there are a few...
Or soft drinks.
Yeah, there are a few pubs that are now turning into these things, they call them gastro pubs, because they have a restaurant.
Yeah.
But I don't like eating in a pub. It doesn't feel right to me. But it's because sometimes they are in a very small village, quite the distance from a town. And in the past, people could travel, spend the night in the pub and then drive back again. But now you can't do that. It's a bit problematic.
Yeah.
So they need to have good food to encourage people to go and visit the other village.
Yeah.
So people will go there and eat, maybe have one drink, and then they can drive home again.
Yeah. So, and not children are allowed in all the pubs.
In some pubs they allow children, maybe during the day.
If they have food, maybe as well.
Yeah. Some pubs are more tolerant. But even in our local, I think there's 8 o'clock is the limit for children. I think that they don't mind during the day if you take children in, so long as they're not running around.
Yeah.
It's the same as dogs. Dogs are allowed in so long as they don't run around.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't like dogs in pubs. It's okay when they're proper pub dogs that have been trained how to behave. Some dogs, they know how to behave in a pub, and when they come in, they go straight under the table and they go and hide under the bench in the corner. Mm-hmm. They wait for their owner to have 2 pints, and they know when the second pint is finished, they come out from under the bench and they're ready to go home. Yeah, some of them are very well trained. Yeah, very quiet dogs.
Well, I think pubs are not places for children or dogs anyway. What about pub games? Like, that's something we don't do here, but
no.
Want to have more pub games?
Yeah, it's not as common as it was in the past. Maybe because people have mobile phones to look at or something like that. But in the pub I go to, there's a pool table, which is often in use, and it takes up quite a large section of the pub, really. That seems to be quite popular. And there are leagues as well. So pubs have a team, and someone organises a league. So you can go and on a certain night of the week, there'll be pool night, would be like, for example, a Tuesday, and either they're at home where people from another pub come to visit, or that team goes to another pub.
Very professional.
Well, it's not that professional. There's a lot of drinking going on, and they have darts teams as well. That's why if you watch darts on television, the audience is drinking a lot because they all come from pub culture. Yeah. There's lots of drinking going on. But there's a dart league in my town. There's a game called Shove Halfpenny, which I don't know if you've ever seen that in action. Halfpenny is halfpenny, that's short for halfpenny, and it's the old halfpennies that we used to have in the old days. Yeah. And they put the coin on the edge of the table, and you have to knock it into the table, and it has to land between some lines. Yeah. And it's really, really difficult. But I don't think that's as common, because it was always a game that old men played, and I don't think there's many pubs in town now have a team. So there's darts and pool, shove halfpenny, and skittles as well. It's very common in Devon, at least. There's a lot of pubs have a place called a skittle alley at the back, and it's like bowling. Like 10-pin bowling is the American thing that's derived from the old game of skittles. It's a bit like going to a bowling alley, but there's only one alley to bowl on. And you don't have to put on special shoes. You can have your work boots, and you can drop mud all over the floor. Farmers play this game. So it's not as sophisticated as 10-pin bowling, but the principle is the same. You knock things down with a ball. And that's good fun, that is, because everyone shouts and there's lots of banter, as they say. Banter, all that sort of joking between friends and making fun of each other's pathetic attempts and things
good.
like that.
I think it brings good ambience.
yeah. And it's good having a team, and you go off to another pub and you go and visit another pub and complain about their beer because our beer is much better than yours.
Well, that's another thing, isn't it? Beer is very important.
Beer is important. Yeah.
Like here we've got these lagers, and almost they're all the same, really.
That's right. I think so. Yeah. I suppose we should talk about the difference. Yeah. If you've got what people here would consider a blonde beer, they're served very cold. They've got a lot of bubbles and a lot of gas in them.
Yeah.
So all of your Heinekens, your Cruz Campos, and
San
Miguels, and all those kind of things. They're what we call lagers.
Lagers, yeah.
And that is from a different brewing method. I can't remember the details of it, but there's top fermentation, bottom fermentation, and it was a German style that it originated, and that's why it's called lager. That's a German word for. I think it's the cellar, or storage, or something like that. It means to store something.
Oh.
But we also have what they call real ale, which technically is not ale, it's actually beer. But in the north they tend to use the word ale more than the word beer.
But is it the same?
Now it is. Historically, ale didn't have hops, which is a green. I think it's a flower that actually gives it a different flavour. So ale is an older word. And again, it's a north-south divide. If you go to the north, they use the word ale a lot more than in the south, because we are more Anglo-Saxon, so we use the German word beer. And in the north, they use the Scandinavian word ale, is a Viking thing.
I see, but I've seen in lots of pubs like real ale.
Yeah, we tend to mix the two words up now in modern English. But it generally means that it's made in a traditional manner, and it usually comes from a very small brewery. Mm-hmm. There's that word brewery that is very difficult to say. Brew is the verb to make beer. The person is a brewer or brewster if it's a woman, and brewery is the place. So normally you get these things called microbreweries, and it's a very small company that employs like 2 or 3 people, and they usually only deliver in a very small area. So that's why there are so many beers. There are literally thousands and thousands of beers in England, and there's some beers that I've had in pubs in London that were wonderful, and I've never seen them again anywhere.
Yeah.
And there's some fantastic beers out there.
So that's very interesting, because whenever I go to a pub, I really don't know what to ask for, because so many different beers that. And then the pint, because here you can go to a bar, ask for a beer, and they can give a big glass, small, like this. Not a measure for a beer, such But the pint is a pint, and nobody would say a pint like half full or whatever.
No, because here when you're in Bilbao, you can get caña or zorrito, and it's a kind of vague, isn't it?
It's
caña in one bar is not the same as in another bar. They get smaller closer to the centre. And if you go out in the more residential area, you get bigger ones, don't you?
Yeah.
But a pint is a pint. It is a measure. And if they don't give you a full pint, you complain and you say you got to fill it up.
Yeah.
But it's like if you went to buy a dozen eggs and you opened the box and there was only 11, you'd complain. You'd say, I paid for 12. And it's the same with a pint. And there's a little line on the glass that tells you where the pint is. Oh, and another interesting thing, a pint glass in the north of England is taller than a pint glass in the south of England. Yeah. There's still a line on it that tells you where the pint is, but they allow another centimetre, 1.5 centimetres on the top, because in the north of England they like it with what they call a head, the white foamy bit on the top.
I see.
They like a big head on the top of their beer in the north, so they have to have a taller glass to allow for that. Yeah, but the measurement, the line is at the same place, so you still get a pint.
But it's not. No, it doesn't have any gas like the one here.
No,
they put the foam.
Yeah, but it has the natural gas from the fermentation, because as it ferments, it has CO2, carbon dioxide, is a naturally occurring thing. But obviously in the factory type beers, they know people like bubbles, so they put more gas in it. Yeah. But no, it comes with its own natural gas, so it's not very fizzy, and it's not very cold either. It's people think, oh, they drink warm beer, but they don't drink warm beer. It's like saying you drink warm red wine. Red wine isn't as cold as white wine.
It's room temperature.
It's a bit below room temperature, because it should, if it's kept in the cellar underneath the pub, it should be 5 degrees colder or something like that. But it's not as cold as lagers are served.
So how many pints can you have in one of these barrels, and how long do they last, more or less?
In a barrel. Proper? In a barrel is 72 in a barrel of beer, and normally they go in a couple of days. In a good pub where people go there because they know the beer is good, and there's a decent number of people, quite often the barrel will be gone by the third day.
Okay.
Yeah. When it's first opened, it's a bit fresh and it needs to sit overnight, and then the next day it'll be really good, and everyone will be drinking it. And after, when it's been opened up more than that, it starts to taste a little bit old.
So after a couple of days, you can tell it's not really good. Yeah. Oh, it's funny.
Certainly, it wouldn't last more than a week. Once it's been opened and the air has got in, it spoils very slowly. But it tastes a bit tired. I would say tired is the best description. It's not. There's something not right with it. It's not bad, but it's just not as good as it could be. And you know it's been open a little while. So that's why you need people who like drinking that particular beer, and then you know the barrel's always a new. It's only going to last a couple of days, so the beer then is always in good condition. But if you went to a pub where people don't go because the beer is good, then the beer won't be so good because they can't sell it fast enough. You can get smaller barrels, but I think the barrel that the brewers use is a specific size, and I think it's 72 pints. They probably do smaller ones as well if you wanted a smaller one.
They're nice, those beers.
Yeah, and normally if you don't know about beer, you can normally talk to the person behind the bar and they'll give you all the information of which ones. Some are stronger than others, and some are darker. Some have got a very heavy, fruity flavour, especially in the winter when you get the porters, which are they taste heavy. They're stronger and they're thicker, and they've got this lovely fruity flavour. But you drink them slowly. You sit in front of the fire, preferably with a dog next to you, and you do the crossword in the newspaper or something like that.
Another thing I like about English beers is that you can find different strength of beers. Like you can have a weak one if it's during the day.
People quite often refer to the session beer. If it's a lower strength, it means that you can just spend a long time in the pub drinking and you don't get very drunk. Obviously you do get drunk eventually, but you can get through quite a few pints before it has any serious effects. Whereas other beers, you sometimes get people going in the pub and they go, oh, I've only got 1 hour, so I'm going to have the strong one. But if they're there for a long time, they tend to drink the weaker ones. But again, the person behind the bar usually helps out, and sometimes they give you little tasters. And even in some bars, they've got little tiny glasses. They got a third of a pint. Remember, we were in the Champ in Appledore once, and they had 1/3 of a pint. They still served a pint, but it was in 3 separate glasses. And so you had 3 different beers to taste. That was quite a good way of doing it. And then when you've decided which one you like best, then you can just have pints of that one. But it's normally beer, isn't it? Even in the West Country, it used to be a lot of cider, but even so, it's kind of making a comeback, but they've got all these strange ciders now, haven't they? With cider with strawberry and cider with raspberries and stuff.
But that's not really cider.
No, it's strange stuff. It's I think it's to appeal to younger drinkers.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
But a lot of people like them.
And also lots of lagers as well, because I've seen like San Miguel is quite popular there now.
Yeah. Well, there are lots of foreign lagers, but they're actually made in England. It's like all beer. It's a very expensive thing to transport, liquid. So they just start a factory. San Miguel comes from Nottingham, I think, somewhere like that. Mm-hmm. Yeah, you think it comes from Spain, but it doesn't. It comes from Nottingham. But it's this sort of, people have been on holiday to Spain.
Yeah.
They've had this beer, and then they see it in a pub, and they go, "Oh, this is just like being in Spain on holiday." So they start drinking this, and it's not really from Spain. And there's a lot of beer made up in Manchester as well.
Yeah, they have the Italian one. What is it called?
That's right. It was the Moretti.
Yeah.
Yeah, that comes from Manchester. Yeah. But again, people think it's kind of exciting having foreign beer, isn't it?
Yeah, very good, very good.
But you don't get a lot of spirits, as we call spirits, like whiskies and gins and things like that.
Oh, that's because it's really expensive, isn't it?
It's really expensive, yeah. It's got a lot of tax on it. But no, people always imagine we drink a lot of gin tonics.
Oh,
sorry, gin and tonic, it's called in English, isn't it? It's called gin tonic in Spain. We have and in the middle, gin and tonic. But it's much more common here than in England. Yeah, they just think that we do it all the time, but
I think that's because of the Queen.
Yeah.
Because people tend to think that she had lots of gin.
Yeah. Well, if you live to be 97 or something, you're not drinking that much gin every day, are you? But I've never had a gin and tonic in a pub, I don't think. Don't think I've ever done that. I know a couple of people that sometimes have a gin and tonic, but no, I'd say if we went down the pub in the Reform, I'd say 98% beer.
Yeah.
With a few cider drinkers and a few gin and whiskey drinkers. But,
well, I've seen young people having vodka and Red Bull or something like that.
Yeah, that must be awful. I can't imagine anything worse.
Yeah, that's well, but that's for young people.
Yeah.
Yeah. What about music then? That's
Oh, yeah.
also another thing that is very common in England, that you have music nights.
Yeah. They often have a band on down the pub, maybe once a month or something like that. Mm-hmm. And then Monday nights, of course, is open mic. Mic is spelt M-I-C, short for microphone. Open mic night. That's when anybody can go down and you put your name on the list and you get up and you do 2 songs. Normally, on Monday nights, they allow 2 songs. And that's quite entertaining, that is.
I really like that. I think it's very, very good for people to, if you are starting, just to have a place where you can perform and feel at home.
Yeah. And people talk about guitars and they look at each other's guitars, don't they? And sometimes they form together and they make little bands and things like that. And everyone's really encouraging, I think, because some people are really not very good, to be honest.
But it doesn't matter.
Everyone
That's
claps.
not the point, And
always
it's
get
very
lots of
positive.
applause.
I really like it. Because sometimes we don't do things because we are scared and we don't like people judging. So the fact that people are so positive is great.
It's a very brave thing to get up.
I always think that.
Yeah, I've performed in public before, and I remember the first, because I was always one of the audience looking at the one person on the stage. When you're the one up there and you turn around for the first time and everyone's looking at you, my knees were jumping up and down there, and my kneecaps wouldn't stay still. I was so nervous. But you get used to it, and it's like I said, it's because it's so positive and everyone's so encouraging. Then people go away and they learn another song, and some people write tunes, don't they? And there's also that guy that gets up and does the poetry and things like that. And he does interesting quotations and things. And funny anecdotes and sometimes jokes. It's all kinds of different things, but he just reads from a piece of paper. But that's always a really interesting interlude in the middle of all the music. It breaks the evening up a bit, doesn't it?
Yeah.
And the what I suppose Simon would be called the MC. I think that's the word, the master of ceremonies that introduces everybody. And he's always really enthusiastic.
Yeah. You need someone like that, don't you?
Yeah. And of course, then there's a thing called a jam night, which is different.
So what's the difference then?
Well, a jam night is like when we were in the bar in London, in Soho. Mm-hmm. A jam night is when everyone likes the same kind of music and they can play together. They're all quite compatible because they know the same songs.
So that's what you used to do then, yeah?
Yeah. So in the bar in Soho, that was a jam night because you'd go down and say, I want to play my harmonica. And they go, right, you and that bloke there plays the guitar. He's going to sing, and he's the bass player, and you three are going to be in a band for the next 2 or 3 songs.
So that was the blues bar, and everybody was into blues then.
Yeah, and if you know that type of music, you can play with. Someone says it goes like this, and you join in. You can play it because they all follow a similar pattern.
Okay.
And so
I see.
The jam nights are normally blues or jazz or something like that, where people who know the music can join in with other people and improvise stuff. Yeah. Whereas the open mic, you go in and you say, this, you get your 10 minutes sort of thing.
Yeah, glory.
Yeah.
Very good. I never thought about that, really.
Yeah. And then, of course, if you, in our local pub at home, you've got the other side, what is always called the other side, around the other side of the bar, which was always, now I only go there when the band is really loud, because I'm too old for loud music. And sometimes I want a conversation, and I can't have a conversation in the other side where the band is.
Yeah.
But in a lot of pubs, they often had two rooms. And it was really in the days when there was a much stronger class difference. And if all the workers were in one side, they didn't have a carpet or anything, and the furniture wasn't so good because they were all dirty from working in a coal mine or in a factory or something. And then in the other side, they had like a carpet and better furniture and things, and they normally paid a little extra for the luxury. But it meant if you went in with your nice, elegant clothes, you didn't have to sit on a chair, which was being occupied by an engineer or someone like that. Yeah, someone who's going in with all their dirty work clothes. So it was a way of separating the two classes. So you had the lounge, normally was the upper class end. And
very interesting.
Anyway, I think that's everything we can say about pubs. I hope everyone is now keen to experience an English pub. They're wonderful places. And full of entertainment, great places to meet people. And drink
good beer.
Drink good beer, Anyway, I suppose we should finish. We've gone over the normal time limit.
Wow.
So I hope everyone enjoyed that discussion on pubs. And see you next week. So have a good week. Till next week. Bye.
Bye.